Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. So July 4th week, a little bit slower, a lot of people off, not as much going on in the world of sports, but guess what? We're going to keep the content rolling here on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. We are going to continue our college hoops off-season grade series today. We have already done Kentucky. We have already done Indiana. We have already done Arkansas. If you missed any of those, they're available on YouTube. Arkansas, we just ran on the podcast feed, Kentucky, etc. Today, though, it's time to talk about the defending national champions, two-time national champion, UConn Huskies, baby. That is right. Dan Hurley, UConn, the back-to-back national champions. By the way, I mention it all the time. If you are a UConn fan and you're on Twitter, make sure to follow our Torres on UConn account. Do still have a couple more Hurley 24 tees available if you want them. So let's go ahead and dive in. By the way, we'll probably run this on the podcast feed maybe Wednesday, Thursday, give you a little piece of extra content over the holiday weekend. But I bring it up because when I think about UConn, so even before we get into what they lost, what they're bringing back, what they gained, whatever, the thing that probably stands out to me, it really struck me around the NBA draft. This is officially right now the IT program of college basketball, okay? And I think we see this where, whatever, Duke in the early 90s, Kentucky kind of in those mid-90s, 96, 98 range, Kentucky under Calipari those first couple years when they made 4 Final Fours in 5 years. Villanova probably had a moment. Just the program that is operating at the highest level. Everyone's trying to figure out the secret sauce. What's working? Why are they having the success that we're not? And I think UConn's that program right now. You look at the NBA draft success. You look at Dan Hurley, obviously his offseason and the opportunities that he either didn't consider with Kentucky or flat out turned down with the Los Angeles Lakers. The recruiting, by the way, I should mention the recruiting. Like, I think they are now really picking players more than recruiting them. In other words, there are some really good players that they're just saying no to, okay? So I bring it up because they feel like the IT program of right now, what everybody wants to be, as they should be, as a two-time reigning national champion. But also worth noting, I think the big question everybody wants to know, can they do what no one has done since John Wooden's UCLA teams in the, whatever it was, the 70s or whatever? Can they win a third straight national championship? I believe they can. So let's get into who they have coming back. And by the way, just because I say they can doesn't mean that nobody else has a chance. I'm just saying I think they are going to be one of those teams come March that has a real shot at cutting down the nets. So let's talk UConn. And really, to me, well, obviously, let's just start with the guys that are not coming back. They lose 4 starters. Ultimately, none of them are that surprising. Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton, 2 starters on last year's national championship team. They are out of eligibility. By the way, there was a weird moment where like people thought that Cam Spencer might have an extra year of eligibility and it became a Twitter thing for like 2 or 3 days, whatever. They both get drafted in the second round. Tristan Newton to the Indiana Pacers. Cam Spencer ultimately ends up with the Memphis Grizzlies. Beyond that, though, they lose 2 other starters in Donovan Clingan and Steph Castle. Those guys aren't a surprise either. You know, Steph Castle, when he committed, he was kind of like a 4-star top 30 recruit as a junior. But by the time he was a senior, he was a top 5 player in the class. Everybody kind of understood that he was going to be a one and done. And that's exactly what he was. Credit to him, bought into a role, became an elite 2-way player for UConn. He goes 4 to the San Antonio Spurs. Donovan Clingan, I actually was a little surprised he fell all the way to number 7 to the Portland Trailblazers. None of those guys are a surprise, but let's start talking about what they do bring back. First off, 2 marquee players off last year's Final Four team, national championship team, really important pieces in my opinion, Hassan Diarra, Samson Johnson. They were essentially the 6th, 7th man off last year's team. Hassan Diarra, of course, was the Big East 6th man of the year. Energy, effort, hustle. Listen, I go back to that Illinois Elite 8 game when everybody was struggling in the first half, long before the 30-0 run, when everybody was struggling in the first half, Hassan Diarra carried them. Hassan Diarra was the only one making shots there for about a 6-7 minute period. So he's back. Samson Johnson is back in the front court. And what's interesting was Hassan actually came on this pod a few weeks ago. We obviously had him on all season, but he did the offseason pod with us. And he said, like, point blank, I know my role is to be more of a leader, to be more vocal, to be kind of a coach on the floor. So found that to be interesting. It feels like all of the summer social media clips that are going out, he's front and center. He's leading the huddle. They had some competition in Friday or Saturday's practice the other day where there was a podium and he was on top of the podium accepting the gold medal. So I think both are going to have a big year. On top of that, 2 freshmen signed in the early signing period, Ahmad Noel, Isaiah Abraham. Think both of those guys will play a role as freshmen. But when you really start to dive into how do we evaluate the offseason, I think where we start is kind of an interesting place. In my opinion, I think the most interesting thing that happened this offseason isn't what you think it is. I don't think it's Liam McNeely. I don't even know if it's Alex Caravan returning. To me, the most interesting thing, and I said it at the time, was this. UConn a year ago signed a 5-man recruiting class. Steph Castle was the headliner, but in addition to him, you had Jaden Ross, a guard out of New York. You had Solo Ball. You had Jalen Stewart, a forward from Seattle, and you had Yusuf Singari, a big man originally from Africa, etc. I bring it up because one of the more significant moments to me in the offseason was when that transfer portal cycle came, and all 4 of those guys who all played limited roles, Solo Ball had kind of a bigger role early, Jalen Stewart had kind of a bigger role late, but ultimately all of them were reserves, role players, etc. They all decided to come back. And I think you look at the health of a program, and I understand there's a lot of programs, new head coaches, whatever. But in terms of the health of the program, the fact that 4 guys who really didn't play in this era all trust the process, all believe that they will get better, that they will have the opportunity to grow in the program, that they're not being recruited over. To me, that speaks to the health of the program as much as anything. That they believe that Dan Hurley came into their homes 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and sold them a vision of their careers. And that because things didn't go well in year 1, they're not immediately bailing on that. So I think to me, that is a huge, huge, huge thing that probably on a national scale didn't get enough credit. Now let's get to some of the stuff that did get enough credit, because obviously the biggest move probably of the offseason in terms of new players, we got to talk about Liam McNeely. Listen, 6'7", whatever he is, played at Montverde, elite 3-point shooter, McDonald's All-American. And to me, he was kind of the first one. I know Steph Castle was a McDonald's All-American a year ago, but Liam McNeely was the first one of kind of this new wave of recruiting, where if a kid is available and UConn calls, UConn's automatically in the mix, right? Because this was a kid originally committed to Indiana over Kansas. UConn, as best as I remember, and UConn fans correct me if I'm wrong on this, I don't think UConn was really much of a factor in his first recruitment. But he opens things up. Calipari at Arkansas wants him. Mark Pope at Kentucky wants him. And he says, I'm going to go to those 2-time defending national champions UConn Huskies because they put guys in the pros. They win at the highest level. They'll develop me. And oh, by the way, that offense that they're running is elite under the leadership of Luke Murray, one of the lead assistants, along with Kamani Young. So Liam McNeely, I think he's going to be a star. The cool thing, and we talked about him when he committed, is because he played at Montverde, the cool thing about him, he's a guy that's comfortable playing a role as well. Remember, this kid played alongside Cooper Flagg in high school, Derek Queen, a McDonald's All-American who's now at Maryland, a couple other high-profile guys. What is it, Rob Wright, I believe the kid's name is, at Baylor. So he can get you 25 on a night, but he's not a guy that's going to expect to get 25. And if he gets 6 one night, it's not going to ruin his confidence. He's not going to be a locker room guy. He's just going to come back and get you 22 the next night. So Liam McNeely, I'm really high on him. The early 2025 mock drafts are very high on him. McDonald's All-American, projected top 10 pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Also thought great portal cycle for the Huskies. We know what they did, but Terrace Reed, 7-foot center from Michigan, not from Michigan, but played the last 2 years at Michigan, averaged 9 and 7 for a bad team. But the thing that really impressed me watching him throughout this season, he was a kid that even when the team was struggling, he was never a kid that kind of ramped down the effort. In other words, he was a kid that even as the team wasn't playing well, he was still giving it 100%, giving it his all. And I think you put him in this system where players have no choice but to give 100% effort every single time they take the floor. I think he's going to be, star is not the right word, but he's going to be very valuable to the Huskies. And by the way, very valuable also because it allows them to kind of continue the two big man platoon, something we talked about when he committed. Remember, 2 years ago when they win the title, Adama Sanogo is the starter. Donovan Clingan is his backup. Then Donovan Clingan starts this year. Samson Johnson was his backup this year. Now you have Samson Johnson, Terrace Reed together in that front court. By the way, did I say two-man backcourt? If I said two-man backcourt, I apologize. I obviously meant two-man front court. Anyway, let's keep it going. Aiden Mahaney, by the way, last kind of major addition. I'm so excited to see this kid in a Husky uniform. 6'3", 6'4", average just under 14 points per game at St. Mary's, both in the 23-24 season and also 2 years ago. And what I think is interesting about him is a couple things. One, the three-point shooting actually went down a little bit this year. Trust me, I think with Hassan Diarra and Ahmad Noel leading that offense, and with the spacing with Liam McNeely, with Alex Caravan, I think that we're going to see that three-point shooting percentage increase because of the opportunities that are going to be presented to him. Speaking of Alex Caravan, listen, let's get to the two big pieces of news that came in June because they were big. One, Alex Caravan announcing that he's coming back. Listen, I think this is a cool thing, both about UConn, but about the state of college basketball right now. With NIL the way that it is, players don't have to make tough decisions if they don't think that they're ready to go pro. Alex Caravan, of course, I think he would have been drafted. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would have been a first-round draft pick. And so I bring it up to say, well, if he's not a first rounder, if he's not guaranteed, if he could be a second rounder, he no longer has to rush the process. I think even 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of like, if you're going to get drafted, if there's even a possibility, you just go pro and hope for the best. Now you can come back. You can be a star. You can develop. You can get paid while you're in college. And that's what I think Alex Caravan's going to do. And here's the crazy part. He was really good last year. Averaged 13 points per game. Obviously got overshadowed by the Klingons and the Castles and the Tristan Newtons, Cam Spencers. He averaged 13 points per game, and his shooting numbers were actually down a little bit. I think now with Liam McNeely, he becomes the star, the focal point of this offense, and I expect a big jump from him. I expect him to be a first-round pick. Finally, the last big piece of news of the offseason, this is the most important one by far, obviously. Dan Hurley said no to the Lakers. And listen, we've been over it. I've shared my opinion on it. I don't know that I don't believe it was ever as serious as maybe it was made out to be, but it doesn't change the fact that it also wasn't 0% that he could have been the Lakers head coach right now. Flew out to LA, met with the team, was offered a contract. And so at the end of the day, there was a chance that UConn could have lost Dan Hurley in June of this year. So you could talk about transfer this, Liam McNeely, that, returning players from last season, that. You don't have Dan Hurley. You don't have the head of the snake. None of it matters. And obviously, it would have been catastrophic for the UConn program. But now you look at it from the opposite perspective of Dan Hurley is back, and this program is just it's humming at a level that it probably never has before under Dan Hurley. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to be better than last year when they went 37-3 and dominated the season. But at the same time, you have that guy back. And you have that guy back with the cachet now of saying, I turned down the Los Angeles Lakers. Well, guess what? Again, that's going to resonate with recruits. Malik Thomas, 5-star guard, said, this makes me want UConn more, knowing that this guy was wanted by the Lakers, wanted by LeBron James. Maybe not LeBron James specifically, but you get the point. Malik Thomas was like, that makes me want to play for this guy that much more. So it's an exciting time for UConn, and I look at this overall offseason. I'll say this. I don't think it's possible to be better than last year. They go 37-3, best regular season in the Big East in school history, best regular season period, most wins in school history, dominate the NCAA tournament. I think they played one game in March that it was single digits. That was St. John's, Rick Pitino in the Big East tournament. And so I just bring it up because I don't think you can realistically be better than last year. But a couple things. One, I think they're probably a little bit deeper with capable players. And two, I look at this team. I don't know if they have a true weakness. Think about it. What do you need to win in college? Great guard play. Well, they have 3 dudes that can be your primary point guard if you need to. Hassan Diarra, Ahmad Noel. I think Aiden Mahaney's better off the ball, but he can run the offense in a pinch. You have those 3. You have 3-point shooting. Caravan has shot 40% in his career. Aiden Mahaney has shot 40% in his career. Liam McNeely is a projected lottery pick. By the way, you have NBA caliber talent, which to me is important. Everybody talks about all the things that matter in March. Sometimes it just comes down to, do you